What's up, Dolphins fans? Busy afternoon in Miami Gardens. Chris Grier, Mike McDaniel made 3 different roster moves today. A lot of injury stuff. They signed a player to the practice squad as well as to the active roster. We will break down all 3 roster moves the Miami Dolphins made today. I am Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today, and this is why you subscribe to the channel, because we have you updated every single day with multiple videos on what's happening around this football team. 83 subs away from 76,400. Let's get there on today's show. Subscribe to the channel. Roster move numero uno. The Dolphins have placed cornerback Cornell Armstrong on injured reserve, so he will miss at minimum 4 games. Week 6, Week 7, Week 8, and Week 9. And this is another cornerback that is down. The CB room has just been decimated all the way back until July when Kader Kohou suffered that injury that put him on injured reserve and ended his season. You look at Storm Duck missing the last 4 games. You place Jason Marshall Jr. on IR. There's just been a revolving door of injuries in this Dolphins cornerback room. And Armstrong was becoming a starter for this team. He played 63 snaps over the last 3 weeks. And all of those snaps did really come between weeks 3, 4, and 5. And he wasn't that good. Let's just call a spade, allowed 3 catches on 4 targets, a QB rating of 143.8 when targeted, and even allowed a touchdown in his limited opportunities. But over the past 2 weeks, he was the starting nickel for this football team. And I know it's hard to imagine that, and it's like, why is Cornell Armstrong a starting corner for our team? Yeah, like that question probably should be asked, but in Week 4 against the Jets, he played 27 snaps. And then Week 5 against Carolina, he played 23. And that was before his injury forced him to leave the game halfway through it. So if he doesn't suffer that injury in Carolina, well, he's probably finishing the game with above 40 snaps played. He was the starting nickel corner. And as we've continued to move forward through this season, the injuries to this cornerback room has just shrunk it completely. We used to show the cornerback depth chart graphic as a group of 3. Well, you can really only show it as a group of 2 right now because the Dolphins have 5 corners on the active roster. Rasul Douglas and Jack Jones, those are your 2 starting corners right now. You have Juju Brents, who obviously the Dolphins waived on they picked up after the Colts waived him. Ethan Bonner, and then Storm Duck, who's been out with an injury. But when you look at this cornerback room, well, you don't really have any nickel corners. So, what's the plan here? I'll tell you what the plan is in just a little bit because it's pretty evident what it's going to be. But roster move number 2. Miami places Armstrong on IR. They have spot on the 53-man roster. They sign Jordan Colbert back to the 53-man roster. The safety, the former UDFA out of Rhode Island. And Dolphins fans should remember our good friend Jordan Colbert because he has been in the organization since he was signed as a UDFA in 2024. Spent the entire 2024 season on the Dolphins practice squad and actually made the initial 53-man roster in August 2025, but then was waived a day after roster cutdown day to make room for the Rasul Douglas signing. He has been hanging out with the Dolphins practice squad, and then they bring him back to the active roster. And before we progress further in today's show, welcome Jordan back to Miami. Spam his jersey number down in the comment section, 43. Welcome him back to the Dolphins. This is what he did in the preseason this year for Miami. He played 97 snaps, so he played a ton, had 9 tackles, 1 TFL, had a missed tackle rate of 16.7%. This is a fringe roster guy. Jordan Colbert obviously is someone Miami is intrigued with because they've invested 2 years into him with having him on the practice squad. They liked him enough to keep him on the initial 53-man roster to waive him because think about this. If they were not really in on Colbert, they would have just waived him initially and maybe let him go to a different team. But they wanted to hold him through that roster cutdown day so he couldn't go on initial waivers. And he played a couple different spots here. And we talked about it. Cornell Armstrong was a nickel corner. So it's like if you are replacing Cornell on the active roster, you would have had to assume it was going to be another corner that can kind of fill that void, since there really isn't any corner on this team right now that can play the nickel. Well, in the preseason, Colbert only played 8 snaps in the slot, primarily played at free safety and in the box. So you have to presume Jordan Colbert is not going to be the guy that, quote unquote, replaces Cornell Armstrong. And Colbert didn't have the best preseason in terms of his ability to cover down the field. Allowed 3 receptions on 3 targets for average 6.7, gave up a touchdown, and had a QB rating of 134 when being targeted. So you, once again, look at what he specializes in how he was used in the preseason, and you have to assume, well, this is not going to be a Cornell Armstrong replacement, which is why I think it's an interesting move. Am I upset about Jordan being brought back to the active roster? No, not in the slightest. But if you would have asked me, would you rather have Jordan Colbert or sign a legit cornerback to the 53-man? I probably would have sided with going with a legit corner that has played the nickel in the slot in the past. More coming up, but we are sponsored by Ethos. Have you or a friend ever experienced a loss, which has you thinking, how about how to secure your family's financial future? With life insurance through Ethos, your family is protected. Life insurance is a perfect way to make sure you're covered. Right now, you can get your free quote at ethos.com/NFL Daily. Ethos is an online platform that makes getting life insurance fast and easy to protect your family's future in minutes, not months. There's no complicated process, and it's 100% online. No medical exam required. You just answer a few health questions. Some policies as low as $2 a day, billed monthly. And as of 2025, this March, Business Insider named Ethos the #1 no medical exam instant life insurance provider. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos. Get your free quote at ethos.com/NFL Daily. That is ethos.com/NFL Daily. Application times may vary. Rates may vary. Links in description and comments of today's video. After the addition of Jordan Colbert to the 53-man roster, the safety room is absolutely loaded. 6 people. 6! I don't know. I should have looked it up before filming this. I don't think there's another team in the NFL that keeps 6 safeties. Like, that is just such an astronomical number. You see some teams just keep 4, let alone 6, at any given point during the season. You have Elijah Campbell, Dante Trader Jr., Ifeatu Melifonwu, and now Jordan Colbert backing up Minkah Fitzpatrick and Ashton Davis, which, by the way, has been the starting safety duo for the past couple of weeks. And I mentioned it a little bit earlier and foreshadowed that this was coming, but the solution to replacing Cornell Armstrong and not really having a nickel cornerback on the roster right now is painfully obvious. It is going to be a mixture of safeties, because if you have no slot corners, the best way to fill that gap is to be playing 2 corners on the boundary and then playing 3 safeties at all times. We know Minkah Fitzpatrick has a ton of experience playing the slot when he was with the Steelers and with the Dolphins in his first go-around. We know Ifeatu Melifonwu can play the slot. He did it in Detroit early in his career when he came into the league as a coverage safety more than a run-stopping physical safety. So if you're asking me how I expect this cornerback and secondary to look, I'm going to have to assume, at least for this week, if they're going to have 5 DBs out there, it's going to be Rasul Douglas, Jack Jones, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and then you're going to see a combination of Melifonwu, Ashton Davis, Dante Trader Jr. playing in the slot and playing out deep with Minkah, or Minkah is going to be in the slot. Seems like the obvious way this is going. The other roster move the Dolphins made, they did add a corner, just not to the active roster, a familiar face. Kendall Sheffield has been re-signed to the Miami Dolphins practice squad. And as I mentioned, he was with the Dolphins this August during the preseason. He was part of the initial cuts made in August, just a day or two before actual roster cutdown day. And this is a fascinating player because there was at one point where he was #1 on the depth chart. Sheffield only played in 32 snaps throughout the preseason, did pick up an injury after the second preseason game, or in that game, I should say, which sidelined him for a couple weeks, which may have ultimately cost him a spot on this roster. But through the first 32 snaps he played in games 1 and game 2, he was pretty solid. I give him credit. He only allowed 1 reception on 1 target for 4 yards, had a QB rating when targeted of 83.3. Like, Kendall Sheffield showed some nice things in his limited opportunities during the preseason games against the Lions and Bears was the first preseason game. I almost forgot about who they were playing. But if you remember, this is the initial depth chart starter. Like, if you go back to who was starting in that initial depth chart that Miami released before the preseason game, the starting corners were Mike Hilton in the nickel, obviously didn't make the roster, Kendall Sheffield and Storm Duck. Those were your 3 starting corners. Now, that may have been deception. That also may have just been the actual case. And then Sheffield got hurt and ultimately got waived because he wasn't able to stay healthy. I mean, there's so many different ways you can try to break down how it ultimately went down in August. But with Sheffield being signed, it's another opportunity for us to mention how thin this team is at cornerback. It's just unbelievable. We showed the depth chart earlier in the video. The Dolphins only have 5 corners, not all fully healthy because Storm Duck's still recovering from that ankle injury. And I actually want to talk about Storm Duck because this shit really pissed me off today. Like, I was telling Coop before we filmed this video, the incompetence that was displayed by Mike McDaniel and company today is abysmal. And I know we use the word incompetence a lot. It's a favorite word of us here at Chat Sports Dolphins Today. But it's really true. Like, ready for this? You see what's on screen. Mike McDaniel at his Wednesday presser said Storm Duck is not yet ready to practice, but Cedric Wilson will get going, who the Dolphins signed off the Saints practice squad last week after the Tyreek Hill injury. You want to practice today? I'll let you guess. Storm Duck practiced. What? So you're telling me the head coach tells you that Storm Duck, who's been out since week 1 with an ankle injury, not ready to practice yet, but then 3 hours later is at practice. What are we doing here? What? It's incompetence. But I'll also mention this. Why on earth did the Dolphins not put Storm Duck on IR? Like, he returned to practice today, so maybe he can play on Sunday and suit up in week 6. But there's also a high chance he's ultimately going to miss this game against the Chargers, which would be his 5th game in a row that he has not played in. And if that is the case, you are wasting a roster spot on Storm Duck. I get it. You have limited players that you can have return from IR. And you thought, hey, there's a chance he returns in 3 weeks rather than 4. But it's been 5 potentially. You're really wasting a roster spot on Storm Duck when he's been out for potentially 5 weeks. It is just bad roster management. And I still can't get over McDaniel saying he's not going to practice, and then 3 hours later he ultimately does. It's just unbelievable, folks. It really, really is. That'll do it for today's show. We'll see you tomorrow with more content. We'll be live tomorrow as well. So if you want the latest on the Miami Dolphins, subscribe today. And if you're still watching and aren't subscribed, clearly like what we're doing. So what are you waiting for? Join the fam.